I have a blurry image of dudes doing well together, or we rise to do the work of men, or brothers are stronger together than apart. That's the blurry image of the liminal order. There's no way to map out step by step every which way to get to this particular destination. But what we started with is a boundary. Let's just start with a boundary. If you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. And we decided that the boundary is going to have conditions for you to pass through, for you to decide whether you're in or out. We kind of decide if you're in or out. And if you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. So now that you're in, how am I going to use complex system analysis, applied complexity here to get this blurry outcome that I want, when really what we're taking is, like, right now we got 700 guys. We're taking 700 guys, we're putting them inside this boundary. And then we have certain parameters and certain ideas and things that we can tweak, but we're talking about real people now. Now, I took Joe's applied complexity class, and I sat there and I watched as he created these models, and he changed the parameter on this, and the speed at which this thing did that, and the rate at which this thing passed information to the other, and the rate at which they would replicate or they would die, or how long one could stay open or whatever. And by tweaking those parameters, the blurry picture became much more defined, and the pattern emerged, and there was the thing that emerged out of the interactions, and you set the stage of the interactions, or the conditions for the interactions. Now, what a complex system, men in a community. It's complex. We don't know what's going to happen. It's the interactions between the things that make the thing become the real thing. I'm going to ask you, you can ask me, let's have a talk here. How do we convert these concepts that in computer science and in data and whatnot that are very easy to manipulate? How do we convert them into human things? Or what has historically been ways that we do that? How do we control the parameters? How do we, like, socially? You see what I'm getting at? Like, for example, like culture. Culture, I guess, is a technology that helps set the parameters of the things that are functioning within the complex system to get the blurry picture of, like, harmony or
Right.
progress or whatever.
Right.
Help me explore this idea when we've got a barrier, and we've got men, and we've got a blurry picture. What are the various things that we can tweak in order to get to the outcome that we want?
Well, clearly, I mean, and obviously part of what you've been doing is a piece of that is, okay, once you're inside the boundary, what is our source of connectivity? How do we actually interact with one another? Are those primarily dyadic interactions, sort of one-on-one? Are those somehow group interactions? Are these all online? Are they in person? Who comes up with the new ideas of what to do next, and how do those get fed back into the system? How is either buy-in to those ideas facilitated or otherwise? How is something that's perceived as a bad idea flushed out of the system? So I mean, these are the kind of parameters I see in the kind of social network that you're talking about. And I know, why don't you tell me, what have you been playing with, and what have you perceived to be working and not working?
So one of the things that we have a problem with in LO is discoverability. We have so much information and so many good things happening and so many amazing initiatives and so many amazing projects and so many amazing guys that what we have trouble doing is highlighting and surfacing these these great things for everyone to observe and then participate with. So from your class, I remember very clearly you showing, like, the random ants going all over the place, looking for food,
Yep.
going all over. They're going all crazy. They're just seemingly random going all over. One of them finds a piece of food, goes right back to the nest and leaves a trail. And then the other ants are doing their random thing, and they come across the trail and they're like, oh, snap. And then they go to the food, and then they go right back. And before you know it, this random map of ants is now just a straight line from the nest to the food, nest to the food, and back and forth. So I took that idea and we turned that into a cultural piece, a meme, mythology. We call it breadcrumbs are brotherhood. Okay. So we say this all the time. Breadcrumbs are brotherhood. Breadcrumbs are brotherhood. What does that mean? It means if you come across something interesting, fascinating, that other people need to know about, make it a point to return to the nest and tell everybody about it. And we've actually found just by saying breadcrumbs are brotherhood, we take we take this notion that I learned in your class, these true scientific principles about complexity, we've turned them into language and then into social behavior that has then resulted in additional information being surfaced and more good things happening within the organization. So that's one example. I would like to learn 50,000 more of those so that we can continue to fine tune this thing. So like I don't know what kind of parameter that is, right? I don't know what kind of tweak that was, but it was directly taken from your class and I directly applied it through this method and it's directly having positive outcome.
Mhm.
What else can we do? How else can we do this?
So one thing is again, I always look to biological systems to kind of inspire these things. And one thing is this kind of idea of coopetition. So obviously you have competition, you have cooperation, both happen in ecosystems. Sometimes two agents are both either at the same time or at different times cooperating versus competing. Think about a sports team at practice versus game time. You might actually compete at practice with your teammates. So you're competing against your teammates, but then you get to the game time and now you're cooperating with your teammates. One thing about competition is it has this amazing kind of psychological energy to it. So winning in a competition can be like its own reward, even if there's no, say monetary reward attached to it. Obviously, if you have some external incentive, that can be great, but competition by itself can be its own reward. So setting up things where you're actually explicitly competing to achieve some more or less blurry outcome can drive a lot of innovation, a lot. Now, how do you decide who's won, this and that, the other thing? Those are all details we worked out in a specific context. But that would be one place where I would say, and we're talking about brotherhood here. So you got a lot of testosterone, a lot of dudes who would relish the competition. So I would say that's something that LO should absolutely be leveraging as an additional kind of parameter to tweak. Is what are the means of competition and potentially cooperation, either in the context of those competitions or otherwise. Now, I think you said discoverability, and that's obviously a hugely important one to a sprawling information space. So, I think, as I was saying before, I really think that these kind of emerging networks, LO being a beautiful example of one, are going to have to reckon sooner than later with the fact that localized communities where people are interacting in the flesh are they have a kind of advantage and possibility space that you just can't get if your connections are only virtual. So as far as discoverability goes, I think, and I know that LO has done some work on this, but really kind of figuring out who's where and who's around, what are the kind of possibilities of those local clusters, and all the way to and I think this has even happened, but all the way to the point of people getting up and moving so that they're closer with one another, so that they're in a place that's more in line with their values, around people that share their values, et cetera. Writ large, I think that's what we are seeing happening in the U.S., and we should be encouraging it. Like, yes, you love California, then go to California, stay there. You love New Hampshire, then come on up and stay here. Like, we need to organize so that our values are aligned and our lifestyles are aligned, so we're not at one another's throats all the time. Back to the LO and parameter setting and tweaking there. It's just the fact that and you see this on, as you move from social media platforms, like across them, and feel the different feelings they all have. Like, Twitter has a different feel than Facebook, and Facebook has a different feel than Instagram. So this is the point where on the digital side of things, the very particular details of the infrastructure and the way they facilitate interactions has a huge impact on like what actually comes out of those. So for LO, I would also be playing heavily with that. I know there's a few. I know you do that. Again, you have like there's a forum and there's the chat app and all that, and they facilitate different kinds of interactions. I think one piece that could potentially step things forward is to like soak that in. Like, first of all, maybe what's a technology that's just not good? Flush it out. What is the different kind of functions that these facilitate versus one another? And then focus on, like you said, with the sort of the cultural mythology, focusing on getting the culture to use those tools for what they're strong for and not for other stuff. And probably in the case of LO, there's some custom type of interfaces that could be built to really flesh out where it's obvious that, oh, if we could just do this, that would be great, but none of the kind of off the shelf things facilitate that. So,
well, that's why the liminal order.
If you want to talk about, offline, we can definitely talk about that too.
Well, dude, the liminal order is not only a community; it is a tech company because we're trying to we're trying to solve this problem. Once we solve these problems, then we're going to have a very valuable product on our hands. There's no question about that.
That's very true.
When we have been trying to get people to move, to do things, and I don't mean locations, which has happened, but I just mean to take certain actions. We're realizing that story and mythology has a huge part in it. And what has been really exciting for me is to see how, like, why has mythology evolved in human society? And then now I understand a little bit about complexity, and now I understand a little bit about actually managing communities. And it's to get the ants to go where you want them to go. I mean, and to transmit that information that was back then and to send it into the future. It's a time travel mechanism to send what you learned back then into the future through mythology, through story. And we work on that by telling stories all the time and repeating things that people did well, how they did that, in order to incentivize and induce people to do sort of the same thing. Now, we have multiple modes of communication. We have the instant message apps that we use. We've got the long form forum that we use. We use Zoom and video chat. We do local in-person casual meetups. We do regional, more formal meetups. We've had national meetups. So we're trying to hit every sort of mode of communication, see which ones produce the best results. In person always produces the best results. It always gets us closer to the blurry image of dudes doing well together or rising to do the work of men. We have definitely experienced that, like, the Zoom stuff is awesome and it has had tremendous results. But the magic, the real magic of the Liminal Order comes when people get together and break bread and have some drinks and, like, do things, activities together, build things together. Men need an activity usually instead of just sitting around gossiping. And it's more fun and more productive that way. And we're learning. One of the things that I have observed, which is fascinating, is like our technology shaping our culture, right? And as we add more people, the technology's own limitations are limiting the culture that is developing, which is limiting the outcomes which happen, which are limiting our impact on families and communities and on the nation. And so two things that we're really focused on are signal to noise ratio. Are you putting out signal into the network or are you putting noise into the network? Ask yourself this question. So along with breadcrumbs or brotherhood, we ask signal to noise, preserve signal to noise ratio. And we describe it as this: the bigger the room, the higher the ratio, smaller the room, the lower the ratio. If you're just in a group with 5 guys, you can just be putting out all kinds of fucking noise. You could just be like sending memes and talking shit and saying that you burped or whatever. But if you're in a big room, everything that you say should be high value to everyone. And so signal to noise ratio and then network bottlenecks, right? So that's when you just got too many people in one place trying to squeeze through a little hole. So what do? We distribute the flow of people. This is why we went to a cohort system instead of having everybody into one group. Now we put them into cohorts of 150, and there's less of a network bottleneck there, because we're also trying to capture the power, the network power, right? The power of an increasing size of a network, which is not linear. It's not 1 + 1. It's each person's then connection to every other person in the network increases opportunities and possibilities. And so I've just had this very revelatory experience of, like, using network science, complex science to create culture, mythology, and human behavior, and then see how all of our regular human culture and mythology and experiences are solving the same problems pre-technology, pre-communication, pre-all of that, and to see how they're all united and aligned and have similar properties has been blowing my mind, dudes.